Madam President.
Senator from New Mexico.
Madam President, on August 5th of 2015, 3 million gallons of acid mine drainage laden with heavy metals and other contaminants were released into Cement Creek by an Environmental Protection Agency contractor who was investigating contamination at the Gold King mine in San Juan County, Colorado. Contaminated water flowed down Cement Creek, down the Animas River, into the San Juan River, resulting in water use restrictions and emergency responses in Colorado, in New Mexico, in Utah, on the Southern Ute Reservation, and the Navajo Nation. You need only to look at the photos of bright orange water streaming through these various drainages to see how terrible this spill was for affected communities and for water users. The Gold King mine spill placed a heavy burden on states and tribes, on local governments and communities. And the spill hurt businesses, farmers, and ranchers throughout the region. Since the spill, I have visited impacted residents and communities, worked closely with local and state and tribal leaders to make sure that water is monitored for contaminants and that the costs from the spill are repaid. Last year, I was proud to help pass a measure in Congress that will ensure that state and local and tribal governments will be fully reimbursed for their emergency response costs, and which establishes a long-term water quality monitoring program in cooperation with those local stakeholders. However, on January 13th of this year, the EPA and the Department of Justice issued an outrageous decision that the EPA is not liable under the Federal Tort Claims Act for the damages to water users caused by this spill. This decision represents a broken promise from the EPA that it would fully address this environmental disaster. Now, while the agency has taken steps to clean up the mine, no farmer in New Mexico, no farmer on the Navajo Nation has received a dime of compensation. And distrust for the government has understandably deepened across the Four Corners region. During his confirmation hearing before the Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works last month, President Trump's nominee to run the EPA, Oklahoma Attorney General Scott Pruitt, said that he would review the agency's decision not to make payments to claimants affected by this spill. Madam President, if he is confirmed as EPA administrator, Mr. Pruitt must take immediate steps to restore trust among the people of Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, the Southern Ute Tribe, and the Navajo Nation, who have already waited far too long for the EPA to keep its promise and to compensate them for the harm that has been caused. I will hold Mr. Pruitt accountable for cleaning up toxic abandoned hard rock mines in the West like Gold King, and I will hold him accountable for making sure that the water that New Mexico communities and farmers rely on is safe. We shouldn't wait for more disasters to strike. New Mexico communities deserve full and complete protection for their land, for their water, for their livelihoods. Unfortunately, I have real reason to doubt that Mr. Pruitt will take this responsibility and core mission of the EPA seriously in his new role. As the Attorney General of Oklahoma, Mr. Pruitt has built a long track record that is antithetical to the EPA's core mission to keep our nation's land and water and air clean. Mr. Pruitt repeatedly fought against the EPA as it implemented measures to safeguard our clean air and clean water. Rather than protecting the health of Oklahoma families, he has filed lawsuits against the EPA to stop rules that would have reduced smog, reduced soot, crossing state lines, protect against emissions of mercury and arsenic and acid gases and other toxic pollutants from power plants, and improve air quality in national parks and wilderness areas. Mr. Pruitt has shown little regard for the safety of our drinking water, filing a lawsuit to stop the Clean Water Rule, which would protect the natural filtering system that supplies drinking water for 1 out of every 3 Americans. And Mr. Pruitt sent a letter to the EPA opposing even preliminary research into the impacts of hydraulic fracturing on our water resources. Mr. Pruitt has been a friend to polluters, helping them to use his office as a conduit for their special interests. He has sent letters on official letterhead to the EPA, Department of Interior, the Office of Management and Budget, and even to the President of the United States, copied and pasted nearly verbatim from language written by industry lobbyists. And perhaps most damning of all, Mr. Pruitt has repeatedly denied the scientific consensus on human influence on climate change, including as recently as an op-ed published in May of last year. It takes a willful disregard for data-driven science to ignore the increase in extreme weather that we are now seeing on a regular basis thanks to climate change. Just last Saturday in Magnum, Oklahoma, an all-time record of 99 degrees Fahrenheit was set on February 11th. Imagine that, 99 degrees in the heart of winter. Folks, I wish I was making this up, but no snowball on the floor of the Senate can erase these facts. And it was Mr. Pruitt, the Attorney General of Oklahoma, who sued the EPA to prevent measures to limit greenhouse gas emissions, the very cause of climate change. Americans need a leader at the EPA who will take action on climate change. And we need someone who is guided in their decisions by the best available science. I have heard from thousands of New Mexicans who have made a strong case that Mr. Pruitt is not the right person for this job. I will not vote to confirm Scott Pruitt, but I will say that if my colleagues move forward with this nomination, they can be sure that we will hold Mr. Pruitt accountable for decisions that hurt the health of New Mexico families. That includes making sure Mr. Pruitt rights the wrongs inflicted on communities in the Four Corners region by the Gold King mine spill. It's going to take many years to clean up the legacy of 100 years of hard rock mining and the impacts on our watersheds in northwestern New Mexico and on the Navajo Nation. In New Mexico, we have a saying, water is life. The water we drink and the air we breathe are not negotiable. My constituents in New Mexico cannot afford to see the EPA stop working to protect us from air pollution, to conserve our water resources, and to work to reverse the damaging effects of climate change.